Okay, um, I was very happy to discover a book on Joseph de Cupertino that is just a couple years old, published by Yale University Press and written by a Yale history professor. And he used to teach in my state in Minnesota at St. John's College, which is a school. I've had some relatives go there also. And so essentially, he argues that levitation is historically real. It's not some mythology. And it's pretty wild that somebody would make the claim that levitation is real in our high tech age of extreme, um, like so called science and engineering and everything. Um, He did not mention Michael Grosso's book on Joseph de Cupertino, or Michael Grosso has a couple books, so I'm assuming he cites Michael Grosso, but he also seems to have used original references because he is a history professor, and so he actually read all the um, the monk um, accounts in the Catholic Church, and he's also a Catholic, and um it's the book is not just about Joseph de Cupertino, but also about Saint Teresa de Avila, and he had written a biography about her already, and read it in the original Spanish because he's actually from Cuba. He's Cuban, probably like Cuban American now. Um, the His claim is that there's some kind of other dimension that Joseph Cupertino was accessing, and this explains why his robes would freeze and they wouldn't move at all. Um, and you could grab onto him like somebody when he would pull other people up into levitation, um, a couple times that he talks about. And so when this happened, you could like grab onto his clothing. And also when he came out of levitation, he would continue right where he had left off right before he went into levitation. So Um, he also describes how Saint Teresa d'Avila would not want to be taken into levitation because people didn't have any reason for levitation. They didn't understand it, and she was afraid it would bring too much attention to her as a person. And that's the last thing she wanted because the paradox is that the levitation is brought about from extreme meditation and prayer, and um so uh, that was the big paradox about levitation is that, well, what's the point of it? Why would God create levitation? And his claim is that, well, it's completely the opposite of the rational scientific age that of modernism that was developing in the 1600s with Isaac Newton, the scientific revolution. And let's see, I have a book here on human limitation. Anyway, I ordered his book. He has several talks on um, YouTube, and I did a blog post with some links to his talks. But, of course, my response is that levitation is symptomatic of negentropy because negative entropy also is anti-gravity, and that's kind of an unusual way to think of gravity. Because, but that is one of the arguments about gravity is that it's based on entropy, and and when you study the quantum physics on a deeper level, um, then you see the connection between a anti-gravitational repulsive force and negative entropy or negentropy, and this is what's been demonstrated in the entangled photon weak measurement experiments that I've researched and discussed. And that was kind of his point about Joseph de Cupertino, is that he became like an expert on these esoteric religious concepts because of his experiences, of his profound spiritual experiences, even though he was completely uneducated otherwise, but he had this kind of like intuitive, um, like he was channeling almost basically. And let's see, that was another point that actually I was listening to Haley Reinhardt, the singer, and she mentioned how her she had an aunt who had sort of like ESP visions, and that and her mom is like that also, where they rely on their intuition, and it's probably tied to their religious views also, but um I think it's she implied it's tied to their music, being immersed in music. And um I don't know if Carlos Eire is gonna get into that, but like we were in church yesterday, we were doing a mantra from this. It was a musical phrase, but the pastor called it a mantra. But the music that we had a guest musician lead the music for the service, and so she had us. It's what you call a round in music, but it's in non-Western philosophy. It's called a mantra. So you can see there's this overlap between music as a round that you repeat the same frequency over and over as like a foundational home tone that she then improvised off of singing. And her melody was very much like an Eastern tuning. It was more like maybe like Irish or something, but it was definitely um, very modal in the tuning. Um, Sounded like it was from India more like than Irish, but it was kind of like this overlap, or maybe Arabic or something. But the the idea that music enables you to, like, it's almost like a type of prayer, because when you pray, you're often also relying on a mantra, and that's what this guy said when he wrote his book. People don't realize that it's actually a very religious book, and he kept reciting the Jesus prayer as he wrote the book. And so I'm very excited to read the book, and I actually emailed the guy because he's relying on this multi-view reality of quantum physics, and he cites another quantum physics books about that promotes this multi-dimensional universe kind of cosmology. But that's not, I don't think that's a like proper understanding of it. I think that like the multiverse is pretty much not accepted by um almost all scientists. I don't think it's a there's no way it's falsifiable. It's not, there's no, real evidence for it. It's just kind of a trendy I think the reason it's trendy is because it fits into sort of like this postmodern ideology where anything goes in our high tech culture. So it's kind of ironic that he would just say, "Oh, it's the multiverse," you know. um, and I mean, serious scientists, everyone that I've like every serious quantum physicist just totally rejects the multiverse. So, but the in popular culture, people cling to it because it's sort of like a catch-all term where when you can just say the multiverse and anything can happen. So, other than that, I'm not going to try to teach him science, you know, because he's a history professor and people don't want to really take the time to really study science because it's boring and technical and stuff. Um, but I think the philosophy of the science is important because it ties to like our ecological crisis and political ideology and stuff like that. And of course, in the context of religion, you know, if he's approaching it from a religious, he's like, I guess he's like pro Catholic Church apparently, but he said when he was at St. John's, he wanted to teach the history of the church and the dean of his school, the history or whatever's the religion department was just like, no, we're focused on current times, current news. And so then he asked if he could teach a history of heresy, and then he's like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." And the reason being that we live in heretical times where I guess I'm assuming that's what he was implying, like the if you're focused on the current times, well, the attendance at church is pretty much down. You know, the traditional institutions like marriage is over over 50%. Um, don't get married anymore or get divorced, and um, so if you're not getting married, there's no like that's part of the church. The church tradition is marriage. Um, yeah, so the it's like what is heretical anymore if you don't if you consider yourself spiritual, but are you still Christian? Well, that would be where you get into heresy. And these mystics that levitate, they were considered heretical also because, especially like his point was like, especially in the Protestant Reformation, like those kind of miracles or paranormal phenomenon are considered to be like the devil works of the devil, as you had this anti witchcraft movement, you know, with the modernism and um, let's see. So I just was reading Morris Berman's new um, blog post, and he was a math PhD, but he taught in liberal studies and philosophy of science, and his whole career was focused on this, just the subconscious drives in Western civilization and how that relates to rationalism versus um, like witchcraft and spiritual, paranormal, mysticism, the irrational, and yeah, he moved to Mexico and he sort of just completely rejected the U.S. as a decaying empire that's falling apart, and now he's in his mid 80s and he's basically just like, well, the reason World War I happened, which was like the Great War that killed tens of millions of people, was just because people were bored. They were bored with peace, and they subconsciously they wanted some kind of excitement, and that the war brought some kind of ecstatic release to humanity, and that humans are ultimately just irrational and therefore controlled by their subconscious drives. And the whole point of meditation is to try to get beyond that, so you're no longer controlled by what Buddhism calls the lower emotions, which are like in also found in Taoism. So the emotions are based on liver or organ blockages. So liver is anger, sadness is lung blockages, the kidneys are fear, the pancreas is worried, thinking too much, and the the heart is overexcitement or just like falling in love. And then um of course the reproductive organ, is lust. And um so when you meditate a lot and you open up the third eye, then you're able to achieve what in non-Western philosophy is called being a god man, god man, like a yogi. And so the universe itself uses the pineal gland as a transducer that then has a holographic information about the lower emotional blockages, not just in yourself but also in other people, based on the organs of the body and the frequency of the light. And so this is like an ancient science that I don't think Morris Berman really figured out. Like he has a book on the San Bushman culture called The Wandering God, but he never figured out that there's a method to the madness, that it's a science that science calls it non-commutativity. Um, so he never, like, even though he's had a PhD in mathematics, I don't think he didn't quite take it deep enough, because that's the whole problem with Western mathematics is it's all based on Platonic philosophy. So he cites like Bertrand Russell, but Bertrand Russell was essentially a Platonist. And so anyway, Morris Berman did fascinating research, and it's kind of similar to what Peter Levenda researched too. It's this idea that you have this like it's what Wilhelm Reich also argued about fascism being kind of a return of the repressed, of the subconscious drives. And when you think of somebody like Trump being a child rapist, and yet women um, appear to like basically worship him, in a cult. He was very popular with the ladies because it's like they're attracted to his power and domineering presence or whatever, bravado, and yet he's a child rapist. If you look into it, and it's like, well, women are supposed to be caring and based on love and empathy and child raising. So there's this paradox where the subconscious drives take over and people are controlled by their lower emotions. But the the argument is that in our original human culture that this wasn't true, that there was this direct connection with the universe, and it created a harmless culture, what Dr. Elizabeth Marshall Thomas called the harmless people, based on spiritual healing and music and dancing. and people just don't study our original human culture enough to know what it entailed, um, and why why it was so successful in spreading around the world. But it became a victim of its own success. That's essentially what happened.